Welcome back to A Glass Half Empty. Before we went on the break, we were counting on our fingers how many issues there are to address before you have a successful raging startup. We've already spoken about simplifying processes. The next point, the most important one for many people who are into bigger businesses, could be infrastructure. So I invite thoughts now on people who think that infrastructure can be a key issue for anybody who's preparing to start up in this country.
When we look at the businesses out here, everything is sunrise sector, but if I talk about a sector like rural finance or something, cost of communication, as he mentioned, is one key. The telecommunication sector is doing a lot, but what about the government in maybe the IT sector in rural areas and those kind of things? And also in terms of networking, all the entrepreneurs here I feel have gone on their own. Are there entrepreneur networks which the government can set up, incubation centers which the government can do? What can the government do there?
Right. So I think on this entire front about infrastructure and what all the government can do, the key problem that creates a bottleneck at all locations is the information availability. So I think the government is doing a lot in many of these areas, but how does an entrepreneur get to know about it? I mean, where does he go? When he actually wants to start up a company, whom does he speak to? There is no helpline, there is no one-stop shop, there is no single window clearance anywhere for any kind of services that the government is offering. So we are 2.5 years into our company, and a year back we actually discovered, quite by accident, that the government has quite a few facilities where you can go through certain plans and get zero collateral loans. And these are available exclusively for startups.
So UTVi, you wanted to add in?
Creating awareness, because in fact I had met somebody from small scale industries and some of the schemes were so good, but it's just that people are not aware of it. So
carry on.
I'm not sure I agree with this point being made, because today, if anything, there is information overload. You go to Google and put anything, millions of things come up. And for entrepreneurs, there's so many sites, there is TIE, there is the SIDBI, which has got a guarantee facility without collateral. I mean, it is just you have to take that one step and you get information. Availability is not as much of a problem as interpreting it for your benefit.
So in terms of guidance then we don't have the right windows, right?
I would like to add here that what government can do for small scale entrepreneurs who are starting up. I think one thing which is very crucial when you are starting up is the supply chain management. How do you handle the warehouse? How do you handle the technology, which is so expensive and it's a long-term investment? I think government should come out with something in this budget, at least for the small scale industries or entrepreneurs who are starting, at least a long-term fund without interest for the first 5 years. This will encourage a lot of entrepreneurs to invest in supply chain, and we're losing huge money in that. I think government must come in at least at the infrastructure and supply chain management.
Right. You agree?
I just like to add to that. I think what is happening is that because there are lots of these private networks that are coming in, which are mainly backed by VCs and investors who are actually putting in their money, what tends to happen is that there is development that is happening in certain sectors. So if you look at the number of startups, number of new companies that are set up, you'll see a huge number of companies in the internet space or in the IT space where the leverage is very high. However, how many entrepreneurs do you see in manufacturing or in retail? The number of companies that come up in all of these sectors are much lower, largely because the kind of finance that is available is for a 3 to 5 year time scale. For a manufacturing company to really make it big, you need a 10-year time scale or a 15-year time scale. And who's going to back that? The government has to, because that's about nation building. And that's where the government has to play a very important role, and not the private investors.
See, I agree to that point on the manufacturing sector. Probably the scale of investment required is very high, and probably these VCs are not up to it. But there are sectors, for example, there are a lot of funds chasing the education sector in India, which ultimately would help in nation building. So there are not a lot of startups coming up even in the education sector. There are funds, but there are no ideas.
Look, even in manufacturing, there is a reason why VCs or PE funds may not be looking at those particular sectors. And like you spoke about, I think it's all about returns. So instead of asking the government, historically we found that the government has been great when it enters into any position of helping anybody. So I don't think we should try and get that. I think I'd rather see the government again focus on PPP, which is public and private partnerships, where essentially they incentivize VCs and PE funds to invest in sectors that otherwise do not get as much investment.
What about the gentleman here? Education sector, like he was mentioning, has kind of got a lot of incentives as far as the government is concerned. Has this helped you?
Not at this point yet. But certainly from our perspective, we'll also be looking at private funding companies who has this education fund with them. They're very keen to have. So our essential business has a lot of funds now available. Not available 4 years earlier, but now I think we are also looking at speaking to a lot of people, and we see ourselves being funded in the next 6 months to 1 year.
If you see the government, this new type of business or new type of entrepreneurs coming in, so far these businesses are not getting industry. End of the day, they are not getting industry status. And though they don't get industry status, a lot of funding is not done in this area.
Because it's not industry status.
Absolutely. So
and
all businesses have been getting this industry status.
Right.
They have a ministry to attend.
Right.
So there's a minister to attend. And though it is easier for government to address them, and they're not getting in here, probably they need to come in and understand what is IT, what is retail. All these sectors have not been getting industrial status. I think we demand that.
Isn't the government looking closely at MSMEs to be able to kind of look at their specific requirements?
I think quite a lot is being done to encourage small and medium enterprises in the country. A few years ago, government implemented a separate piece of legislation called MSME Act. So quite a lot is being done, but what they could do more in this space is to reduce the botherations for a small enterprise from the government side.
Okay, so we've touched on most of the problems that entrepreneurs face here. We're going to take a little break, but when we come back, we'll talk about only ideas to solve all those problems. That's coming up right after the break.
Hello again, the glass is still half empty and we are trying to make it half full. That's the whole idea. We're talking to entrepreneurs, and of course we have people over here who have started off their businesses with some amount of success, and they're sharing their views as to how to make the glass half full.
Like we were mentioning before we went into the break, now we want to talk about direct solutions, ideas from everyone to the problems that we have been discussing on this show. The first problem, like he said, is simply the process of registering yourself, finding the right kind of information. So from the entrepreneurs sitting here, one thought that you have that can address that problem.
What happens today is that for a person to start off his own company, there is a certain amount of resourcefulness, or you would call it jugaad in the Indian context, which is assumed that, yeah, you are starting a company, you should know this, right? You should be able to do it. Whereas if you look at a developed country, it's not that tough. I mean, a person who's a PhD or a scientist who's zero at jugaad will be able to start off a company and make $1 million.
The need for jugaad needs to kind of go away. That's the point that's being made.
As a solution, I think if there is one thing that should get started off, it's a helpline.